Hello everyone and welcome back to the video. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at a theory-based tier list, and theory-based tier lists are fairly self-explanatory. If you took out tournament, longevity, external factors, essentially you're getting rid of human error and then putting these characters on the tier list. If they were being played at their best, how would they rank versus each other? And the main things that I'm looking for in today's video are going to be which characters I just disagree with the placements on straight up. I think this character is higher in theory or lower in theory, as well as the characters that have drastic changes between a normal tier list placement and a theory tier list placement. And in case you're wondering where this list came from, it came from my lovely sub Discord. They went ahead and made this thing for me, so thank you everyone in the Discord that participated. And if that sounds like something you would be interested in, or you just want a place where you can hang out with people that care a lot about Smash Ultimate, a link will be down below so you can go join up in there. But let's get right into it. Another thing to note is that this is ordered within the tiers, and starting off with the bad tier, our worst character in the game, both in theory and in practice, you're going to hear that expression a lot in this video, is going to be Ganondorf. There's two things the Smash community can agree on. The first one is that Ganon is the worst character in the game, and the second one is that Steve is the best character in the game. And when you're looking at the rest of the bad tier, I honestly don't have too many issues with it. Like, maybe I would change around a couple placements. I would maybe put Dr. Mario above Lucario, because in theory, Lucario won't be able to get max aura because he's going to die super early. But also, who cares? The only character I would actually make a serious consideration of moving out of the bad tier would be Isabelle, and that's simply because she has an infinite, but also, it's not a very good infinite. It's just really hard for her to get it. Jab is not a super easy move to hit, especially with Isabelle's subpar stats, but if she does hit it, she does have an infinite, and that is a lot better than all of these characters. So maybe I would move Isabelle out of this tier, but it's not like she would be substantially higher. It'd be like 5 spots max, so it doesn't really matter. Next up is going to be the med tier, and this is the first good example of a character being way lower, or I guess way higher than they would be on a normal tier list, and that is going to be Incineroar. I think on a normal tier list, I would have Incineroar somewhere towards the higher end of mid tier, maybe even the lower end of high tier, because this character is incredibly scary and hits like a truck, but in theory, Incineroar's not going to be able to land too many hits on you. He is the slowest character in the game. It is very difficult for him to win interactions. His disadvantage state isn't very good, aside from Revenge, but Revenge is something that can be very easily played around if you just time Incineroar out, and as the slowest character in the game, in theory, that's not something that's so hard to do. Now, we all know in practice, it is a lot scarier, and if you mess up 1 or 2 times versus Incineroar, you're going to explode, and that's why you see him have a lot more success when he's actually being played. But I do agree, on a theory tier list, he shouldn't be doing as well as he does, specifically with Skyjet. We all know who I'm talking about. Now, for the Med tier, there's only 2 characters I would move out of this tier, and that is going to be Meta Knight and Wii Fit. I would move both of these characters up. For Meta Knight, he just has a lot of ways to start 0 to death or very high damage conversions, whether it be from dash attack, down tilt, tripping, a grab, a handful of his aerials. He just has a lot of different opportunities where he can just get a ludicrous amount of damage. And also, Meta Knight doesn't really have a disadvantage state because Dimensional Cape is one of the most broken moves in this game, and people don't talk about it enough. You're essentially forcing a 50-50 every single time you use that move. Am I going to use the hitbox on this move, or am I not going to use the hitbox? And even if your opponent somehow manages to guess which of those you're going to do, they still have to guess the positioning. Am I going to go to the ledge? Am I going to go in front of you, on the platform, behind you, to center stage? He just has so much mix-up. And also, Meta Knight has like 4 dumps, and he doesn't even need to use Dimensional Cape. His disadvantage state is just really good, and his on-hit game is also really good, with so many ways to be able to start his conversions, and he has amazing edge guarding. Just for all of that stuff, I would move Meta Knight up, because in practice, he's a little linear, but in theory, he has so many ways that he could just rack on the damage. And then for Wii Fit, deep breathing is just really good. And the way that I view Wii Fit in theory is, whenever I have deep breathing, I am going to be running at you, I'm going to be approaching you, because I'm one of the scariest characters in this game. And if I don't have deep breathing, I'm just going to be like John Numbers and just ledge stall. And over and over again, I'm going to soccer ball, I'm going to use my neutral special, I'm going to heal a little bit, then I'm going to get my deep breathing back, easy recharge, and then I'm going to kill you at 50%, and Wii Fit can just keep cycling between those 2 things, and because of that, I would move her up a little bit. Next up is going to be the solid, aka Swordies tier. Why is it called that when half the characters aren't Swordies? I don't know, I didn't make the list, but you're going to notice 2 characters that are a little bit higher than you would expect, and that's going to be Bowser Jr. and Duck Hunt. And I actually agree that they should be this high, especially for Duck Hunt, because in practice, I don't think Duck Hunt's super good. In theory, though, he does have a couple super strong things about him. You're going to have that frame one out with Can. Frisbee is a very strong move. You're able to chain people across the stage, use it as a kill confirm. The camp game for Duck Hunt is just really strong, and I wouldn't put put Duck Hunt any higher than this because you're still going to have one of the worst recoveries in the game. You're still going to be a fairly slow and stubby character, but the camping, the frisbee, I can kind of see the vision here, and I think this placement is fine. And then for Bowser Jr., he just has some actually super solid strengths and some really good kill confirms, but like Duck Hunt, in practice, they're not always going to come out, and he also has a really bad recovery that's going to be holding him back. But Duck Hunt and Bowser Jr. being this high, I think is absolutely fine. There's also a couple of characters that are a little bit lower than you expect. I think the Shotos are a little bit lower, but the main one for me is going to be Lucina, because in practice, Lucina is a very solid character. She's just a character that fundamentally allows you to shine. If you are better than your opponent and you're playing Lucina, you're probably going to win because she just has solid buttons, solid advantage state, solid neutral. The character is just solid. But in theory, I agree that Lucina should be this low, especially when we're talking about the damage output. Lucina's damage output is not very good, even compared to characters in this tier. But for characters in this tier who are pretty much all going to be doing at least 60% from a hit, whereas Lucina's getting at most like 40% from a hit, she really just can't compete. So even though in practice she's a character that allows you to fundamentally shine, I agree that on a theory tier list, she should be this low. If there's one character I would move from this tier, it would be Falcon, and I've always been a little bit harsh on this character, but not as harsh as my sub-Discord. They hate him in there, and for good reasons, but Falcon on hit is just a very scary character. He has a lot of ways where he can start some very good combo extensions, and a lot of those combo extensions can end with a knee, and that's where I see this character having mass success, whether it be from a down air, a grab, a falling nair, a falling up air. You just have so many ways where you're able to get that knee and steal a stock at like 60%, and Falcon's stats are also just really strong, and that's ultimately the thing that puts him over the edge for me, because on hit, Luigi is a better character than Falcon. But Luigi's not coming at you like a race car. Falcon is going to have that really solid neutral, and he's going to have a really solid damage output, and if people are able to get that theory knee every single time, he's going to be a character that is going to have a lot of success. Even if his recovery is a little bit weaker, I think it's justifiable to move him up a tier. Next up, we have the busted tier, and there's a handful of characters in this tier that are way higher than you would see them on a normal tier list. You got Marth, Pichu, Ices, Falco, Rosalina, Lucas. You wouldn't see any of these characters this high on a normal tier list, but on a theory tier list, they all check out, except for Pichu. I think Pichu's way too high. I would have him somewhere in the middle of this solid tier, and my reasoning for that is on hit, Pichu is very scary. He has good edge guarding. He's got a pretty solid neutral if he is winning neutral. If Pichu loses neutral or just goes even in neutral, neither opponent gets hit, he has still lost that neutral because he's going to be damaging himself. Even when he's doing a combo, he's going to be damaging himself. Let's say you do 60% with Pichu, you're taking probably 5% yourself. That is a lot. On a Pichu stock, you're normally dying 70, 80%, and that's in practice. In theory, you are going to be dying way earlier, and all of these players, all of these characters rather, are going to be doing like at least 60% per hit, and that's essentially an entire Pichu stock. So yes, he can hit very hard, and his neutral can be scary, and he can steal stocks, but all these characters have a good neutral. All these characters can steal stocks. Not all these characters are dying to a random back air at 40% in the middle of the stage, and half of that percent they did to themselves by just playing neutral. So Pichu, I think he's just too light. He hurts himself too much to be this high. Yeah, he's scary when you're getting hit by him, but once you hit him, it's just kind of over. So I would move him down to the solid tier. But let's talk about some of the other characters that are a little bit higher than you would expect, starting off with Marth, and you're going to have Marth above Lucina, and this is the first ever tier list where this is actually true, because in theory, Marth is just better than Lucina, because you're going to be able to actually hit tippers, you're going to be able to have max space moves all the time, and you're going to be able to get the most out of what makes Marth Marth, but he still isn't significantly higher than Lucina. As you can see, a very small gap between them, and I also think that's true because even though Marth is better than Lucina if he's hitting all of his tippers, he still has that same problem where he's just not going to be able to match the damage output as the characters above him, but this is the only time where it's justifiable that he's better than Lucina. I'm going to talk about Ice Climbers, Falco, and Lucas together because they're all here for the exact same reasons. They're on hit game. Lucas, I 100% agree with his placement. Snake text, like Slingshot text specifically, is very, very good. And if Lucas players were actually doing that, he would be here on a normal tier list, but they're not doing that. So he's only here on the theory tier list. And then Falco and Ice Climbers, I would actually move both of these characters down, but I would keep them within the tier just towards the lower end of the tier. Falco, his recovery is just a little bit exploitable, but also on hit's really good. And then for Ice Climbers, killing Nana is still a very big issue for the character, and once you kill Nana, they become super useless, and in theory, you should just be timing the climber out until they're forced to SD, because that's how you should be playing versus Ice Climbers. Again, in theory, we're not actually doing that in the real world, but you just have other characters that have similar damage outputs that don't have to worry about losing Nana, so that's why I would move Ice Climbers down. And the final character that I talked about initially was Rosalina, and I would move her down only within the tier though, and it's the exact same reason of why I moved Ice Climbers down. When you have Ice Climber and Rosalina at their max strength, which is with Luma and with Nana, they can match the strengths, if not beat the strength of some of these characters in this tier. But when you lose Nana and when you lose Luma, you become a significantly weaker character. Now, losing Luma with Rosalina is nowhere as big of a deal as losing Nana, but it still does affect Rosa, and because of that, I would move her down within the tier. But I can't deny that Rosa on a tier list is a lot better than she is on a practice tier list, because the biggest thing about Rosalina that makes her not super viable, in my opinion, unless your name is the Buzz, is how hard she is. But in theory, you're able to do all the hard tech. You're essentially just playing two characters because you're able to have so much control over Luma, and you can just send them in to do all of the dirty work. You're able to constantly be applying a pressure to your opponent while having no risk to Rosalina herself. But then Luma gets swatted away, Luma dies, and for like 10 seconds, you're just not a great character. So because of that, I would move Rosa down within the tier, not by a significant margin though. Now, the only character I would move substantially within this tier without actually moving them out of the tier would be Wolf, and I would move him towards the top end of this tier, and my reasoning for that is going to be side B and back air, specifically side B though, because you look at the start of Smash Ultimate, the reason that Chrom was so strong when that game first came out was because people didn't know how to edgeguard him, but also Chromicide is just a really good option. Wolf also has Chromicide, or he essentially does. He has a way to confirm into a stock trade where the opponent is going to be dying first. And that makes it so percentages don't really matter for Wolf. The only thing that matters is, are you on even stocks? Because even if you're at 120% and your opponent is at 0%, you can still take the stock first. Whether it be you're both at 2 stocks and you just want to reset, or you want to steal the game away, it makes Wolf have an insanely good X factor. And then the rest of Wolf is also just very solid. He has really easy bread and butters that are able to rack on the damage. Even without side B, he has some super solid confirms. Forward air, back air, for example, is one of the best confirms in this game. There's a whole lot more where that came from. You're also going to have really good tech with footstool out of shield, because you can do footstool out of shield up B, and you can drag your opponent across the stage, and up B is just really strong. Wolf is just a character that hits super hard. I think the fact that he has a stock trade that you can confirm into where he dies second makes him better than some of these characters. There's only 3 characters I would move out of this tier, and that's going to be Brawler, Wario, and Pichu. Already talked about Pichu, so I'm not going to do that again. And for Brawler and Wario, I would move both of them up. Starting off with Brawler, if you are ever forced to tech versus this character, in theory, you should be dying, because Brawler has the best tech chasing in the entire game, specifically because he has down throw into footstool. And I know that doesn't sound like much, but down throw into footstool puts Brawler in the perfect situation where he can follow every single tech. And in theory, you're going to be hitting your tech chases, and if Brawler is able to hit his tech chases, he's just going to be able to convert off of them, because obviously you can tech chase into down throw. If you're able to get down throw onto the platform, you can again force the tech chase with down throw into footstool. Then you can get another down throw into an up B. That's going to get a kill. And even if you can't get it on the platform, you're able to combo your opponent onto the platform. Down throw into footstool forces a tech, and if Brawler is able to follow up on that tech, he's able to convert a kill off of it, and in theory, you're going to be able to follow up off the tech. So Brawler, he's definitely going to go higher because of that. And also, it doesn't even need to be the 0 to death. He just has a lot of different ways where he can confirm into up B for a super easy early kill. Editing proof block here, I just wanted to mention that down throw into footstool really only works for like 40%, and it's not even a major part of Brawler's game plan. It's just the best way to showcase how insanely good this character's tech chasing is. I do believe that he has the best tech chasing in the game, because the second that your opponent gets onto the platform, they're kind of just dead versus Brawler, and he has so many ways where he can start that conversion to get them onto the platform, or once on the platform, he can confirm into the up B. This character just has a grab bag of tricks that allow him to confirm into up B. Tech chasing is just one of them. And I would move up Wario because you can get so much more utilization out of Waft. I'd say on average, Wario players are getting one full Waft and one half Waft a game. But if you camp super hard with this character, which you should be because he has some of the best aerial mobility in the game, making his whiff punishing phenomenal, you can get probably 4 or 5 half Wafts a game. And if you just rip those the second you get it, like you never see Wario players using Waft on the first stock because they want to save it for the last stock. They want to make that big comeback or be able to secure that final stock. But if you use it against your opponent, even if they're at 100%, by the time taking the second stock comes around, you're gonna have another half waft. I want to see Wario players using their waft to just block recoveries, go for reads, because you're going to have multiple of them throughout the game if you are willing to rip them, take the risk, because if you miss, it's not the end of the world. Another one's gonna be charging. And we have arrived at the Jesus tier, and as you can see, there's a pretty big outlier right there in Link, but in a theory tier list, absolutely he should be this high. Bomb is one of the best moves in the game because you have so many different ways where you can get a 0 to death off of it, and it also gives you one of the best recoveries in the game. It pretty much just makes Link one of the best characters in this game, and without Bomb, he is just an okay character, but Bomb is really hard to use, so in practice, you don't see Link with the result, and that's why he's so much lower on the tier list, but I agree. In theory, he absolutely should be this high. Other characters that are a little bit higher than you'd expect would be Shulk, Ness, and Zero Suit, and I would maybe move Ness down a little bit. I would still keep him within the tier, though, and that would just be because his recovery has a couple ways where you can mess with it, but this character on hit is just insane. Like, the side magnet stuff that you can do with Ness is absolutely broken, so he definitely deserves to be in this tier. Zero Suit is in this tier because her neutral is so good, and in theory, Camp Zero Suit is one of the best characters in this game, the second hardest character in the game to catch aside from Sonic, and that's why Sonic is, spoilers, in the highest tier, but Zero Suit is basically just Diet Sonic in this sense, and then you're going to have Shulk and Monado Arts, if you're using them correctly, are like just so good. So I definitely agree with Shulk being in this tier. The theory tier list is where Shulk shines. There's a couple of characters in this tier that I'm going to be moving down, but the only characters I'm going to be moving out of this tier straight up are going to be Aegis and Cloud, and I have two reasonings for that. The first one is going to be their damage output just isn't high enough, and I know that's crazy to say about Aegis and Cloud, but they're going to be getting 50-60% at most from a combo string, whereas you look at the characters around them, all of these characters are going to be touch of death, and you are at least doing like 80-90% aside from maybe Shulk and Zero Suit, but they have other ways to make up for it. And then the arguably bigger problem that both of these characters have are their recoveries. In theory, every single time that Aegis and Cloud get sent off stage, they are just going to die unless Cloud has limit, so he has a little bit of an X factor right there, but it is just not enough. These characters are so easy to edge guard, and in practice, it can be a little bit tricky, especially for Cloud, which is why you see him having more consistent results than Aegis, but in theory, you're going to have so many characters with lingering hitboxes or just ways that they can easily contest the up Bs of Aegis and Cloud that are just going to make them fall a tier for me. And we have finally talked about every single character that I move up or down within the tier, so now we get to talk about the theory top 10 characters in Smash Ultimate, and really quickly, I should acknowledge these top 2 characters right here, Steve and Sonic, in a tier of their own. Absolutely, they should be there, the top 2 characters in the game, both in theory and in practice, just not really a ton to say right there, and the only changes I would make to this top 10 is I would move Shulk out, and I would move Game & Watch in. I'm sorry, Shulk, I know this is supposed to be your tier list where you shine, but you just can't compete with Game & Watch up air, and I'm honestly not going to worry too much about the semantics of this top 10 because most of these characters are in here for the exact same reason. Like Rob, Bayonetta, Pikachu, Peach, Sora, and Sheik, as well as Steve, are all in here because they have very good neutral and have so many different ways where they can just 0 to death you or just kill you straight up. It doesn't have to be in 0, of course. And then Game & Watch, Joker, and Sonic also fall into that category, not as much so. I would put Game & Watch here just because he has the best advantage state in the game by far, and also a bunch of different kill confirms and a really solid damage output. Joker in here because Gun is broken and Arsene is broken, and I think in theory, Joker players can make more usage out of Arsene because they can just use down B to get more Arsenes per stock. You should be getting like 2 or 3 Arsenes a stock versus 1 or 2 Arsenes a stock if you are making the most out of down B and you're constantly trying to fish for it, which again, I think is something that you should be doing with Joker because it just makes Gun way better and it makes Joker way better. And then finally, Sonic is just going to have like the best neutral in the game and he doesn't lose matchups, so he should be up here. And I thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. The support has been absolutely unreal as of late. If there's anything that you disagree with on this tier list, be sure to join the sub Discord so you can go argue with the people that made it. Be civil, of course. And if you disagree with anything that I said, something that I got wrong, or if you just want to say hi, leave a comment down below. Be sure to sub while you're down there, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.